My name's Ethan Kershaw. I work in the Department of the City of Wichita at we're hosting a few different educational events this month. About stuff like water conservation, composting, and air quality. So to kick off, we're going to have a presentation by Randy Rubenthaler, and he's from the Sedgwick County Extension Office. He's one of the expert on compost. I believe so. And I'm going to hand it over to him now if he's ready to go.
All right, thank you, Ethan. In here, as Ethan said, I'm Randy Rubenthaler. In here, I'm with the Sedgwick County Extension Office. I had the privilege this year of being asked to join in care of our compost. So whether I have the expertise and knowledge or not, I have the responsibility. I wanted to get a chance to meet each of you and some of the things that key to this. This is really a critical. Why am I doing it? Hey, it's hard. Hey, yeah, I'm doing it. And you got to go out and turn it. You got to save stuff. And I think of talking, I can think of a lot of reasons why. And usually we start off at the top of the list way up here. Say, oh, it's good for the environment. You know, it goes well with mom, ally, all the important things. The things we should do because, but you know, when we get out of composting, sometimes we get us a lot of work. Then for me, I get out of composting. Having spent this time and read this kind. So I want to talk a little bit about this in here, in there. The Sedgwick County Extension Office in here has a Master Gardener program. We take people from all over the county. I think there's about 350. And if you're interested in anything, we start our classes in September, June and July. Take applications in. I will comment and note there are some things in the back table at the end. One of them is how garden is May 3, and it's just full of people like me talk about gardening. Okay, so if you like gardening, you like talking about gardening, great place to start in there. When we by the way, just the basic disclaimers and notification here that we treat everybody just like real people, okay, in here. And we have a whole lot of other programs besides the Master Gardener program that we get involved with, all the way from gardening, which is our Master Gardener program, aging, Medicare, food, nutrition, 4-H development, agriculture. We do a lot of things at the Sedgwick County Extension Office in here. My role has been through the Master Gardener program in here and more of the gardening side of things in here. But we go all the way to this thing and we start off with the basic question, why am I composting in here? This is my friend Army, by the way. He's my mascot in here, and he's more for the kids, because when we talk to kids about composting in here, they're kind of like, you know, but if I talk about worms, they go, oh yeah. Got that. Right, so Wormy is my friend that goes with me in here. So here's 3 good reasons why composting makes sense for us in here. One is it will reduce our watering needs and hold water that we don't lose in here. It's good for the environment. It is not going to landfill. It's not filling up our trash with lots of stuff in here, keeping our stuff and putting it back in our own yard. And more importantly is I get better results in my garden. My flowers, more food. that are going on. When I look at and say, what is it all about in here? The bottom line is, rain is free. Falls on the sky, lands on your car. If it runs off, if it sinks in, goes out the bottom, you lose it in here. If you mix it with your soil, the soil it has this ability to 10 times water. Compost, you can pull it out. When it rains, water takes this ground can stay with it. So people have yucky stuff. Clay oil, yucky. Yeah, that's good. You don't know. Clay soil is characteristic. It turns hard as a brick sometimes, and they went out. It sticks to my state like glue. Of course, stuff sticks to everything, and this stuff in here, it won't dry out. Or characterized by the fact that if you get hard rain on it, it'll hard. It's not on nerves. In some areas, you got to okay, sandy soil in here, characterized that it's the water will flow right through it, and at the bottom, and when it does, it takes all the nutrition with it. So if you down in the root level of the plants, and they hold it. Here, I get back to a loamy soil here, in there with a organic soil, organic matter. When we get our soil to that level in here, you go out somewhere really hot, really dry, you go out and you put your hand in it, think you're smooth, full of life in here. This is where we get all kinds of our life from in here. When I talk about just this, another reason why it is good for the environment. And how many people here recycle? This is the kind of thing that's sort of like, well, of course I recycle. I don't want to throw my aluminum cans away, or my plastic, or I'll either turn it into a recycle center or find a way to recycle. So, everything in your yard can recycle. I have a kind of a saying of my own. All leaves that land on my property are mine. I get to keep them, right? And if my neighbor's leaves blow on my property, they're mine too, right? I want everything that comes in, and I want to recycle everything in it. And so I have a very large compost bin, and I have a lot of trees. So I can generate typically 12 to 14 wheelbarrows full of compost heap. That's finished compost. You gotta remember, if you pile a pile of leaves this high in here to start composting, by the time you're done, it's only gonna be about this high. So it compresses and compacts a lot in here. It does a good job of putting it together. When we talk about yard waste, guess what? That's free too. Everything that falls on your yard, that's yours, right? Why are you giving it away? How many people here pack their yard waste up in bags and put it on the curb trash bin? Right? Okay, but your stuff, you earned it, you grew it, right? and here, and yard waste is free in here. It's something you get and you can keep. It's your grass clippings, it's your leaves. What else can you compost in here? In here, all the stuff that you throw away on the food table, right? Eggshells and coffee grounds and banana peels and potato peelings and watermelon rinds and I mean, anything in here. So about the only thing that we don't compost is we don't compost seeds and dairy products and so and meat products and stuff like that. But if it's organic, it's compost eventually, right? If a tree falls on your yard and lays there long enough, it's compost. It just takes a long, long time, right, in here. Now, most of our time, when we spend time composting, we're trying to build it up to the point where we can get this compost to make it a little faster so that we can turn it out and get it into my rose bed or my flower garden or my vegetable garden and get some growth on it in here. But did you know, like, in this is a little dated, but 2018, you know, we generated almost 300 million tons of solid municipal waste that went into the dump. This is just from people, you know, our normal daily life. That's almost 5 pounds a person per day in here. And once it gets into the landfill, they don't turn it, they don't do stuff in here. It becomes anaerobic in here. And what can happen is, instead of it turning over into nice compost and putting out, you know, the carbon dioxide and oxygen that we want in here, end up with methane. You know what methane is? That's the same stuff that comes into your house for natural gas, right? If you have a natural gas line in your house, you're getting methane. That's what that is. So basically, it's creating natural gas in here, and it's going up into the air, and it is a very powerful, very, very powerful greenhouse gas in here. It keeps us from cooling off and keeps us getting warmer and warmer in here. And if we go to composting in our home and we turn it like we talked about in here, we're going to find that this compost now does not produce any of this methane in here and yet turns it back into the soil the way nature does it. And this is the kind of thing that nature was always meant to do. So recycle, reuse, repurpose everything in your yard that you can in here. And nature recycles, so can you. And you know, when I go to the recycle center over on Clark Street in here, and as I pull out the door, they have a sign on here that says, "You always feel better when you recycle." Right. So I like that. Here's a third reason why, and this is one that gets really personal in here. Why do you want to compost in here? It's because your plants grow better. Okay, I contend, and I can pretty well establish the fact that compost is some of the best slow-release fertilizer you can get. Now, most people go to the store and buy fertilizer, synthetic fertilizer, and in that, it talks about nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus in here, but that's it. That's all you get. When I put compost out there, I get all of the micronutrients. I get copper, sulfur, iron, magnesium, boron, all of those things in here. Anybody grow tomatoes in their garden? Right. Do garden-grown tomatoes taste better than the store-bought tomatoes? You know why? They have more nutrition. Compost feeds all those micronutrients into them, as well as the main ingredients. Store-bought tomatoes are typically grown in a commercial operation in here, so they get synthetic fertilizers and lots of other stuff in here, but they're not getting the basics of the stuff. When you grow at home, your food tastes better. Because I talk about my stuff growing better in here, bottom line is sunshine's free too. every drop of sunshine that falls on my property is mine to use or to lose. And if it lands on bare dirt, it goes nowhere. All it does is evaporate the water that's in there. If it lands on plants, the plants bring in carbon dioxide, they bring in water, excuse me, they bring, they bring in carbon dioxide and they bring in water. They use photosynthesis to make sugar. That's what glucose is, the food that plants live on in here. And it makes oxygen, turns that oxygen back over in here. I was just at the engineering expo last Saturday in here talking to the kids about how trees grow in here. And this is a reference point in here. You breathe in about 100 gallons of oxygen every day, and a tree will breathe out about the same amount of oxygen every day. So you and the tree somewhere, you got a match set, right? In here. So so think of these plants as being oxygen generators. You're putting stuff in here, but you're making these sugars in here, which now become your food and your compost for all the rest of it. So basically it's this: feed your soil means to say that I want to feed the biome of the soil in here. Now, anybody know what the biome means when I say that? What am I talking about with biome? Anybody know? You got when
Microorganisms?
Microorganisms, that's one in here. Funguses, macroorganisms. Can you name a macroorganism? A worm. Or earthworms, right? And here, all of this biome in here. You guys probably know this in here, but if you didn't have your gut biome, you couldn't digest your own food. You have a whole gut biome in here that is in the process of taking the food and breaking it down into something that your body can use. The soil has a biome that takes all of the compost and the carbon in the compost, breaks it down, and gives it into something that plants can use in here. And one of the things that you hear sometimes in here is the term worm castings. Everybody know what worm castings are? Yep, it is. It's worm poop. That's what it is, right? So they eat the compost, they eat the organic matter in here, they use the carbon, they turn it into castings or worm poop, and that is the richest plant food you can get in here. So the biome of the soil is taking and converting all of this stuff. It's feeding your plants and bringing it into where you can get your plants up and healthy and growing in here. And it's a slow release fertilizer because it takes time to do this. If you go out and buy a bag of synthetic fertilizer and you sprinkle it out there, you get an immediate hit. And then it fades and goes away. Right? And here, if I put this compost out there, I get a little hit all the time. It just keeps building. So we're going to grow and look at this stuff as great fertilizer in here. And now I don't have to go to the store and buy it either. Here's another quote from this book, Dirt to Soil, in here. Gabe Brown said, people talk about being sustainable in here. He says, that don't make any sense to me. He says, why would I want to sustain something that's not working very well for me? If I got crappy soil, I don't want to sustain it. I want to make it better. I want to regenerate it in here. I want to make it, improve it, and make it grow in here. So when we put this stuff together and we regenerate in here, we're creating new soil and we're bringing stuff in here. I do believe my garden is taller than it used to be from all the compost I've added in here, and it's getting thicker and nicer and fluffier and the longer I do it. Now it doesn't happen overnight, by the way. It takes probably 3 to 5 years to really see measurable results in here, but boy, can it make a difference once it changes. All right, so let's go to the next phase of this in here. Let's talk a little bit about how do I go about making this compost that we keep talking about in here. Okay. All right, I'll give you some reasons why you'd want to make it. Now let's talk about how we're going to make it in here. If I go and look at it, first of all, what is compost Basically, it is just a whole bunch of decomposing organic matter that is being broken up by the soil biome and the microbes and the funguses and the stuff like that, and it's breaking down into the basic components that have become now plant food in here. We're taking organic matter, and any organic matter technically will eventually become compost. Now, not everything may be the right thing for us to use in our home garden in here, but it brings it back the way nature intended it to. Nature has always, millions of years, it has had leaves fall off, land on the ground, turn into compost, become food again, go back up to the tree, come back down again, right? This is what nature does in here. And so we're trying to move away from us controlling nature to us mimicking nature, trying to do what we can to make things happen. When I go to looking at the word compost in here, you can use it as a noun or verb. You can say, I'm going to compost my food, right, as a verb. But you can also say, my compost was put in the garden and now my flowers are doing better, right? I have the this dark, earthy, smelly stuff in here that everybody talks about in here. So I brought from my garden, I harvested this yesterday, a little bit of my own compost in here. And so you can take the lid off of here, and it's a very earthy smell in here. You'll see what all what all is contained in it in here, and just kind of take a smell on it in here. It's not strong. It should not reek or smell bad or anything like that. You should find that this is just a nice, rich, earthy smell in here. And then when mixed in with your soil, becomes the food for the biome that we just talked about. When I look at, the stuff that we put in, when we talk about building compost in here, we talk about two things, browns and greens. Okay, now we're trying to get a compost with a carbon to nitrogen ratio of about 24:1. And all the difference between a brown and a green is just this, that if it got a carbon to nitrogen ratio below 24:1, it's green. If it's above 24:1, it's a brown in here. And the answer is, in order to make this nice balance, we want some of both, right? And depending on what you're putting in and how the mix is in here, our guideline at the extension office is, well, put in 2 to 3 parts browns to 1 part green. I looked up at the Colorado website in here at Colorado State University, and they say, oh, put in 2 to 3 parts greens to 1 part brown. And then I go to another guy who says, just put in some browns and some greens, what worry about it. And the answer is, you can't really go wrong in here. You're gonna get this stuff in here. So what all goes into in here? So from the brown side of thing in here, you can put in paper, shred paper ever, right? That's great compost. Throw it in, right? That's good brown stuff in here. Leaves fall off your trees. That's great compost in here. Sawdust is a good one. Wood chips in here. If I put mulch out, is mulch compost? It will be eventually. Right? It may take it 3 or 4 years, but it will eventually become compost. So mulch is a great compost in here, in the browns categories in here. On the greens categories, the most common one that I can think of is your grass clippings. Right? Grass clippings are green, and they have a good ratio, and they're nice fit in here. Now, I would warn you, if you put out pre-emergent or herbicide or pesticides, give it a couple of mowing cycles before you put that in your recycle, because otherwise your compost then will have those chemicals that carry over in there. And those are good in here. Now, here's one that may throw you off in here. Coffee grounds are green. Okay, you didn't know that maybe, but coffee grounds are green. Tea bags, lettuce, potato peelings, all the other stuff we talked about in here. Ethan was kind enough to bring us some of his very own compost from his bin in here. I'll pass this around. You have to take the lid off. You don't have to take the lid off. This is undeveloped compost. This is the raw stuff that goes into it in here. And it includes coffee grounds, apparently asparagus and broccoli. And maybe some other stuff. So you can pass it around. Take a look at it. Yes.
If your compost, is that from a pile from last year, or how long did it take for you?
Well, and this is I wintered this over, so I'm just now getting it in here. But I should be able to get, in 2 to 3 months, you should be able to get compost if you keep turning it and you keep watering it and keep playing with it in here. But you can take a year, doesn't matter. Right? So if you just leave it alone, and it'll eventually turn into compost, sooner or later. And so we're going to talk about this, but the answer is yes. All of the above. So here's all the things that we can put in here. And we talked about the carbon nitrogen ratios in here. This kind of gives you an idea in here. Like sawdust has really high carbon to nitrogen ratios in here. And what that means is it takes forever to break down and turn it to compost in here. Stuff like vegetable wastes are very, very good. They break down quickly. Coffee grounds break down quickly in here. Manures are green compost and can be used. However, a warning to you, no carnivore animal waste, so no cats, no dogs, right, and stuff like that. So chickens, cows, sheep, pigs, stuff like that, that can be compost if you have them in here. I don't use that myself in here. I don't have access to it. And when we make this at the Sedgwick County office in here, I try to keep it clean because there's always somebody who says, well, yeah, but what about? And so all of our compost is made just with plant material, not animal waste in here. We can kind of avoid some things in here. So no meat products. And the reason is because if you put meat in your compost, you're going to get critters come in and dig into your compost and throw everything out, right, in here. So they're going to smell it and come and get it. And so don't put meat or dairy products in there. Don't put manure from carnivores in here. If you have a garden and your vines die in here, oftentimes they could have a disease, but as often as not they carry non-beneficial insects in them. And a lot of times these insects will burrow into the vines and lay their eggs. And if you compost them, they'll carry over to your next garden in here. So I would keep the vines from your gardens out of them. And, like old tomato vines and squash vines and cucumber vines and stuff like that. Just toss those in the garbage in here. And then don't put in weeds and seeds. Now, I will qualify that. You can throw in any green weed that has yet to go to seed or bloom in here. But if you put in a seed, a weed and it's full of seeds, there's a chance you're going to carry that seed over into the next garden, and then you'll have more weeds come up. And you don't want to do that. What is this soil organic matter? What is this compost made of in here? So we talked a little bit about this before in here. It's almost 50% nitrogen or carbon in here when you're done in here. You get a little bit of nitrogen in here. We know nitrogen's good. We like nitrogen because that's straight fertilizer in here. And we've got some of your potassium and your potash and so the basics in here. But it's also got molybdenum and copper and iron and zinc and sulfur and boron and it's got all these micronutrients in there too, and it's got the components in here that allow the soil biome to actually work with the dirt in here. The dirt consists of the soil and the minerals and the hard stuff in here. They can actually go in and break those tiny sand and rock pieces and down further and release some of these micronutrients in here. So it's a combination of all these things in here and here. And So when we talk about soil and soil biome in here, what we're talking about is the fact that, we started with dirt. And dirt is just broke down rocks, right? And, eventually, originally, everything was a rock. And it broke down to smaller and smaller pieces until it finally become fine mineral pieces in there. But there's no life in it. No, dirt is dead in here. So it includes, soil is dirt plus the living organisms of the soil, and then all the soil organic matter that you've added to it in here. That becomes this living being in here. The soil biome is bigger than the plants that are growing on top of the surface. The plants on the surface that we see are only about a third of the total biome in here. The rest of it, the roots and the soil and the biome of the critters down below that are living on this stuff in here. And so our compost is feeding that biome. It's making that biome alive. It's making that grow. It's the food for it. And the biome makes the plants grow. That's the whole point of this thing. And there's a whole bunch of processes going on in here. There's chemical processors that break it down in here through aggregates and fungi and protozoa and bacteria. These are the microorganisms that are too small to see anything except a microscope. And then you can get into the next level in here, which are the biological regulators in here. And again, we're talking really tiny stuff, but nematodes, basically tiny roundworms in here, springtails and invertebrates, mites and things like that. These are things that you might be able to see under a magnifying glass, but probably you need a telescope to see, because they're really tiny, and there's just billions of them in there. And then the last thing is the macro organisms in here, and that, which includes earthworms, yes, but also includes centipedes and roly-polies in here, the pill bug, if you will, in here, and beetles, and these guys they eat this stuff and break it down even further in here. All of those together, those are what make this soil alive and well. When you get to a place where you've got compost in your soil, you've got your soil organic matter up, you've got the life in your soil percolating in here, you should be able to dig down with a spade and turn it over and find worms everywhere. You should be able to see the macroorganism life in there without any trouble at all in here. And and there's so many worms that sometimes they don't know one end from the other. All right, now let's talk about what are you going to put it in. Okay, let's see. You said you had barrels that you turn, right? Like this, the rolling barrel, right? That's a good way. At the extension office, we have like a 3 system in here where we go first station, second station, third station, and so you start until you get it going, and then you move it to the middle, let it go a little further, move it to the end where it gets finished, you harvest it, bring it out, and then you get a continuous cycle going. In here, the key on all of these is you want air in them, right? And so of all of these methods, which one do you think is the best way to make compost? Which one do you think will be the best way to make compost? And the answer is, they all are, right? There's no wrong way to make compost. You can't not make compost if you put stuff together in here and give it some air, some water, and turn it, right? And you're going to get it in here. The most common way to make compost is this big pile on the ground, right? Lots of people do that in here. And here, there's an advantage of putting a pile on the ground because now the biome of the soil, the earthworms in particular, come up from the bottom and crawl up into this stuff. This is just pure, this is like a candy factory to them. They just found, we just hit the jackpot, right? They're going to come up there and eat all this stuff in here and here. But you can just put a circle of wire out there, and you can put a couple of crates from your shipping dock out there, in here. You can open them up. You can buy a nice one here with a handle on it so you can turn it in here. The key to this stuff is you got to keep it turning, you got to keep it cooking, and you got to add water and stuff. So when we put this, what's that?
Can you turn it too much?
Not really in here, as long as you keep the water at the right level in here, at the right dampness in here. That's the key in here. Because now, if you turn it more than it needs, it won't help it either, but it won't hurt it. So, in here. What we do is you can throw in, you can start off with just like, a layer of soil, some cardboard, some leaves, some compost, some more leaves, grass clippings, more, and so we just build this thing up in layers. We make a whole layer of it in here. And as we go, we water it with our hand water as we go. So we get up a couple layers, we water it down good. And I don't want to get it wet, drippy wet. I want to get it nice and damp though in here. And then we add another layers, and then we water it, and we add layers, and we water it, we water it in here, and we mix it up, and then we get it in here, and we let it cook a little while, and then we're going to mix it up and just turn the whole thing. Sometimes the easiest thing to do is just you can, if it's on the ground, you can just pick it up and turn it, but if it's in a crate or a bin, you can throw it out and put it back in again. That's perfectly fine in here. And so here's the formula. Here's the recipe to make compost in there. If you go 2 to 3 parts browns, 1 part green, add some water to dampen it along the way in here, and by that I mean layer by layer, not just one on top in here. Mix it thoroughly, get the air into it in here, and let it cook. It's going to get hot. You're going to see this gauge. Now you can get yourself a 24-inch long thermometer with a dial on the end in here. You're going to see this gauge from the center of your pile get up here in the hot zone in here, and it's going to cook it. And it's doing 2 things. Number 1 is it's breaking it down into the components that you need so that it's usable. And number 2 is it's killing anything that's in there that's not supposed to be there, like seeds of weed seeds and bugs and stuff that aren't supposed to be there. Now, if you go out into a good healthy compost on a nice warm day and you can smell it, it's cooking in here, it's got a nice earthy smell, and you go in and you turn it, you're going to see things crawling everywhere. You're going to see bugs and roly-polies and worms and spiders and because they all live in this stuff in here. That's what, this is their candy factory. They're having fun, right? So these guys, you're going to find this thing is full of life, even though it's hot in here. But this is what's cooking, and this is what's going to make it into real compost for you. What you'll see is when you put it in there and you get it started in here, it'll peak up, and when it starts going down, you turn it. That's where you fluff it. Then it'll peak again, you turn it again. In about the 3rd or 4th or 5th time in here, you're pretty much done, and this is going to be this same rich black nice stuff in here, ready to go out into your soil in here. When's it ready? Well, you can harvest it typically and all that. It'll streak down and do that. And then typically, once you get it started in here, you get all the right stuff in it, you get it cooking in here, you turn it, you can add some more to it in here, but it might be easier to start a new pile in a different spot and let this one finish cooking, and then while this one's getting ready, you can harvest this one and get ready for that one and keep it going that way in here. And when you're all done, you get this nice green stuff and you can harvest it. All right, you feel like this guy now? You feel like, oh, this is way more information than I ever thought I would get. Anyway, anybody know who this is, by the way?
It looks like my cat.
It does like your cat in here. Actually, his name is Bill the Cat. This came from an old cartoon series called Blue Cat in here, and they don't make it anymore, haven't for years in here, but he was always my favorite guy on the cartoon in here, so I stole his picture in here. But yeah, sometimes you feel like, this is a lot of stuff to learn and all this in here. And so I'm going to say to you, it's not in here. You're going to take this stuff and you're going to turn it, and you can do it. And you can do a little tiny bit. You can do a lot. You can do, more. You can do less, and it doesn't matter in here. The idea is to get started and get going in here. And my message to you is, don't treat your soil like dirt. Give it some food. Give it something to eat, and let the biome grow. Let that in here, and then let that turn into something for you, which is your plant results in here. So I'll throw a challenge to you. Here's a challenge to you in here. And then, how many people compost? Raise your hand if you compost in here. Okay, in here. If you do compost in here, have compost in here, what do you do with it? You haven't yet. What do you do with your compost when you're done?
I don't think I've ever really let it get all the way cooked. So I'm using it as far as additives to my topsoil, or
Sure, that works too.
have a clay soil,
Yeah.
and I can't do a lot of gardening in that. And then I also have a bunch of containers.
Okay, containers are good places.
And so I'll mix them in the container.
So you put a little here, a little there.
Right.
And-
Kind of use it like top dressing, I guess.
Yeah, you can in there. So here's my challenge in here. Rather than taking this nice compost that you just earned, and I don't care if it's a bucket this big or a wheelbarrow full in here, if you make some compost, pick one spot in your garden, in your yard, one spot, and put I'm going to say about an inch of compost on it in here. You can till it in a little bit if you want to and mix it up, or if it's clay, you may want to, especially clay dirt in here, you may the first time, you may have to get it down deep enough to get it mixed a little bit in here. A lot of people are going to no-till after that and just letting it sit on the surface, and you can broadcast it out. Try to make that one spot much better. Then compare it to the one that didn't get any, so that you can see the difference. And do it. If you can tell that my compost is making my results better, then you're the winner out of this whole thing. You have been able to say, this was worth my time. I worked hard and I earned this, but it's mine, and I own it, and it is mine. This spot in my world is now better because of it. And that might be a motivation to say, I want to make a bigger spot next year. I mean, you can't. It may take you a year or two though to get it. Don't expect it to happen overnight. But in the end, don't treat your soil like dirt. Treat it like it's a living organism. Feed it, take care of it, let it grow. Compost is the way to go. It's going to save you water this summer. It's going to save you fertilizer costs in here. It's going to save you the waste of throwing stuff away in your garbage that you normally would in here. You're going to keep all this free stuff that you're getting anyway. You're going to keep it, and you're going to put it back in your own yard, and you're going to make your own yard wealthy in the sense of having rich plants and rich life growing in it, and a biome in here. And if you can go down and dig in your soil and find worms in here, more power to you. That's the great in here. If you have any other questions or anything like that, contact our garden. We do have a hotline. You can call this hotline number anytime. We're open from 9 to noon and 1 to 4 every day of the week, from Monday through Friday. And you can call that hotline number and ask any gardening question of any kind, and they'll do their very best to answer it. And they will always provide you research-based information on that. In other words, they're not going to say, well, my grandma used to. No, can't do that. They got to be able to pull out a brochure and say, here's a brochure from K-State University that says we could do this. Right?
My
And,
great grandmother used to store eggshells in
Now-
one of those giant containers.
yeah,
For the water, and she had the best rose bushes, any plant she had.
she knew.
That's all she did.
And grandma was right.
And And just.
in here. But if you call us, we're gonna pull out a K-State research book or something that
Oh,
says,
okay.
now, I have one in here that I've got printed up that says, Grandma was right, listen to Grandma. Right. Any questions, anything in here? I've talked a lot, but in here, yes.
So I have a few questions. Do you throw bread that's not organic into the compost?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would, anything, it's plant-based. in here. The term organic means they didn't intentionally put on pesticides, herbicides, and things that can be toxic chemicals in some way in here. But then, if a leaf falls off your tree, is it organic? Maybe, I might put some pesticide, he might have absorbed something too. So all of the stuff goes in the compost that is organic. Now, the process of composting will break a lot of that. So it'll be much more reduced. Any other questions? Yeah.
So you said early in the presentation not to put weeds or weed seeds in the compost, and you said if something like that happens, it will cook out if your compost actually functions.
Yeah, now remember, the center of your pile is 140 degrees, and it'll kill weed seeds. But the edges of the pile may not get that hot, so
long as you turn
so
it
you keep
properly,
turning
it's
and
actually
you keep
cooking
cooking it,
properly.
and
It's
that's
not-
it. So now
Because I know that one of the ways to get rid of
probability.
weeds is to just pour boiling water on them, and it will kill them.
Yeah. Now, me, I just try not to throw seeds in the compost in the first place, but if you do, if it gets in there, usually the composting process will cook them out.
So long as the compost is good, it's fine.
As long as it gets hot. You want to see, it has to be over 131 degrees in order to kill the seeds.
Nice.
Is there a best place in your yard to locate your compost pile?
Usually as far away from the HOA as you can get.
No HOA is where I live, so.
But,
In terms of like sun exposure?
I put mine in the back behind the shed, but some people do it, I've seen people actually dig a hole in the ground, put a bucket in the ground and fill up their bucket. You can do that. I've seen people, you've probably just got this in the back. Where do you put your barrels? You put them in the back of the yard?
Yeah.
Okay, back of the yard, a place where you can get in and turn them, and usually not, in line of sight of the, of the front house and the window. But, I would find a place that's kind of out of the way a little bit and a little out of sight and out of mind in here, but don't be embarrassed about it in here. It's a perfectly legitimate process, yeah.
You said earlier that the compost needs air.
Yes.
But also, there's like the enclosed barrels that people use for compost. How does that work with the?
You gotta get air into it in here. Composting is 25% air, 25% water, 50% material. Okay? And if you don't have that 25% air, it ain't gonna cook. And if you don't have the 25% water, it ain't gonna cook. In here, it'll just sit there, right? In here. In fact, in one of the troubleshooting guides in the back, if you pull the troubleshooting guide, says, what if it doesn't get hot? Well, you probably don't have enough air or enough water. Those are two things, right, in here. Now, if you have an enclosed barrel and you're putting stuff in and trying to compost it in here, that is gonna turn anaerobic very quickly. Anaerobic meaning no air, right, in here. And that will probably take you much longer, and you can do it. Now, there are other ways of composting in here. There's a process where you can fill a barrel full of water and throw all your weeds in there and let them cook and become tea, and then pour the water out the bottom and pour it over the plants, and it makes good stuff too, because it's called compost tea, actually. And it's an anaerobic process. Not great for backyards type of stuff in here, more of a larger commercial side or something, or a farmer, something like that. In here, for us that have homes in here, we just want to have a place to dump like table scraps and like yard leaves. Those, the bin type of thing, or else it's piled on the ground.
So if you do have the barrel type, you do want to keep that open on a regular basis, so.
Well, the act of turning barrel, if it's 2/3 full, you're gonna be turning barrel, it's gonna be flopping over and then
Okay.
mixing itself up.
Like a dryer.
Fluffing, yeah, like a dryer,
Okay.
fluffing it up.
Dryer.
I call it fluffing it up in here. And if you're just using a fork to turn it, All you gotta do is get your fork underneath it and just fluff it up. You know, get some air up in it, and that's a big. Yes, sir?
So you talked about when you were showing like the layering when you're starting your pile.
Yeah.
I guess how do you add in new material? Because like I have a 4-year-old, so that I constantly have small like food waste scraps and things.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm wanting to reduce the amount we put in landfills and put that into something that's useful.
Perfect, good, and a great teaching method.
Yes, absolutely. But so if you're constantly adding to it, then like
Well, number one, when you talk about food scraps and table scraps and things that can go in, burn in here, they compost and break down very quickly.
okay.
They become much. I'll just dig a hole in the middle of it and pour my stuff.
Okay.
You know? Yeah. When I get to summertime, we're eating lots and lots of fresh stuff out of the garden in here. Then you get lots more of that stuff in here. Sometimes I go out a couple, 3 times a week. Dig a new hole, fun. I have to move it around in here. And then, if you're turning it every once in a while, that's going to completely mix all that up in there. And again, then you start over again, start digging a hole, put it in until you next time you turn it.
So when you do that, since that's green, do you need to also add your like 2 to 3 parts brown at the same time?
Oh, yeah, you can, but generally speaking, you got more browns than you got greens anyway.
Okay.
Because if you're like me, I get barrels of leaves, right, in here, and not much for greens in here, so I'm struggling to find enough greens.
Coffee grounds from Starbucks.
Yes, I'm gonna say, if anybody's been to Starbucks, they actually take their coffee grounds that are done, put them in a nice sealed bag, says coffee grounds for your garden, and they put them in a basket by the front door. And as you walk in, you can go, oh, coffee grounds, and take one. And there's been great greens in here, mix up nicely with your leaves, and browns, and stuff like that. Shredded paper, any browns in here, you just mix in these old coffee grounds in here and percolate right on. What do you think? Learn anything today?
Yes.
Coffee grounds are green.
Coffee grounds are green, who knew?
I
Just,
have another question. Like if I'm making like a chicken soup or broth, beef broth, and I just put my vegetables in there and I left it in my fridge for too long, can I take some of those vegetables that have some fat and put it in the compost?
oh, sure, yeah, the main concern about animal waste and meat products and dairy products and that isn't that they won't break down in compost, they will. It's that the raccoon may come and dig a hole in there to try to find it, right in here, and he may, in the process of doing that, throw all your stuff at you. And suddenly you go out and you're going, why are all my leaves laying outside the compost? But for something like that, I would say home minimal. You do very, you do not.
Randy, we had another question online.
Oh, good.
Someone said that they'd heard that coffee grounds can actually kill or harm earthworms, and they wanted to know if that was true or not.
That's a great question, actually, in here. Really, coffee grounds are not a problem with earthworms in here. We do have one thing, though, that can be. If you go into citrus rinds, like lemon lime peels in here, too large of a concentration of those can be harmful to earthworms. We recommend that if you're going to use this for your home garden, you can just kind of spread them out and be okay. If you're doing it, there's a process called vermicomposting, verma meaning worm, basically where all you do is you have a worm farm and you feed it all your table scraps directly, but you can feed it coffee grounds, but we don't recommend you get too many of the citrus peels and stuff like that. But thank you for the question, it's a good question.
Lemon, grapefruit, orange.
Yeah, all of those citrus peels in here can be a little acidic for a worm in here if they get too much of them in here. So break them up a little bit, spread them around in your big compost can to be okay in here. But if you're just directly feeding worms, then you might want to limit the amount that you go in there.
Yeah, I'm really glad we got onto the topic of vermicomposting because I'm going to talk a little more about that actually for the last 10 or 15 minutes we've
All
got.
right, very
And then
good.
we'll have a little more time for questions at the end if you think of another
If you
one
have
you
any
want to
more
ask.
questions afterwards, I'll be here.
So first I wanted to kind of go over that we've got a few other Earth Month events coming up later in the month as well. So we had the event here today, the composting workshop. We had a water conservation event last week, and we have another one of those here at Atwater Neighborhood Resource Center later in the month on the 28th, which I think is Monday. We are also doing a documentary showing and Q&A afterwards at the Advanced Learning Library on April 19th. It's a documentary called Hot Times in the Heartland, and there's some more information on the sustainability webpage. And we're doing an air quality and health workshop on April 21st at Evergreen Community Center and Library. And then we're doing a more broad environments and health event in collaboration with the Health and Wellness Coalition of Wichita on Earth Day, April 22nd at Evergreen as well. And yeah, if you've got questions on those, I can happy to talk and answer those afterwards. I want to make sure we get through a few other things first, but it just so happens that this week is Food Waste Prevention Week. Great timing with our composting workshop. I didn't know that when I scheduled it, but I will take credit for it now. Randy did a great job covering a lot of the basics of composting, so I want to talk a little more about my experience with it and composting in an apartment. You have a limited amount of space for this kind of thing there. So you have to try to find ways you can maximize that space. You don't want to be dealing with any smell or odor, and that's always a concern with compost if you're putting in the wrong things. And you definitely don't want to be dealing with any pests or vectors, especially in a small enclosed apartment. So all I used was a couple plastic bins. Worms, vermicomposting was the method I went with. And that's actually, those scraps are going to go into that later. But I've got a few worms in that container as well. I got some dirt from outside. I got some brown matter, so leaves, paper towels, napkins, stuff like that you can throw in there that kind of balances it out. And I drilled some holes into the lid of the plastic bins to allow for airflow from the top. And so I had to use two of them because you can see that picture on the right. You can see them; they're kind of stacked on top of one another. There's only one lid on them. The second one is to capture water and any other flow that's coming out of the bottom because there's a few holes in the bottom as well to allow for it to drain. So you have to empty that out once a week or so. Sometimes it can be longer if you want to wait on it, but that does fill up over time. And otherwise the worms are pretty self-sufficient as long as you're giving them table scraps fairly often. So obviously vegetable scraps, other plant-based material, coffee grounds, I give them my coffee grounds. And I keep it underneath my sink. That's where I had some space for it. That's a good dark place out of the light, and it stays fairly consistent temperature there, which is also important for them. And I have not had any issues with keeping them alive, actually. I bought some worms at the start for composting, and then they've survived for, I think, 2 years now almost. So that's what it looks like underneath the lid. You can see there's some paper materials that are still hanging out because those take longer to break down, but a lot of the food scraps are already kind of worked into it. It's become that nice, more uniform compost. I wanted to highlight some other composting options as well. Nudge Compost is a local company, and there may be some other ones, but I'm not as familiar with them, but they are able to do some limited pickups from homes, businesses on compost. You could also try to set up a shared community or neighborhood garden compost, because if you're going to have a wider amount of material going into it, it's better if you have more people who are going to be able to use it. A lot more people are interested in using it for their garden than you'd think, and if it's free, people are always going to be willing to take that. And you can also, if you're at a school or a business and you're dealing with a lot of food coming in and out, you can try to do some on-site composting. I think there may be 1 or 2 coffee shops around town that try to do something like that, and there may be other businesses as well, but I'm not as familiar with them. That picture on the right, though, is EPA's wasted food scale. So this is kind of their order of priority and how you want to avoid wasted food. So first you can try to produce, buy, and serve only what is needed. Try not to overbuy, get too much food, or cook too much food all at once. Obviously leftovers aren't a problem, but if you're consistently having to throw away food that could be eaten, then that is edible. That's wasted food. You can always try to donate or upcycle, finding other ways to get that food back to someone who can eat it. There's a group that I'll talk a little bit more about on the next 2 slides. That's called ICT Food Rescue, and they help divert food that would otherwise be going into trash or compost or somewhere else, and have it where people will be able to eat it, people in need. You can use it for feeding animals, or you can leave it unharvested if you're pulling from a garden and allow it to just go back, decompose in the soil. We can compost, like we've talked about, and that's more of the anaerobic digestion. You could go for the anaerobic digestion, which Randy's talked about both of those, or apply it to the land directly. And we're trying at all costs to avoid sending it down the drain to the landfill or incinerating it without any energy recovery in that. Just to try to prevent wasted food as best we can. So there's a lot of different ways you can do that, and this kind of orders them in priority. We'll go past that for now, so I can make sure I leave time at the end for questions on all the content. But I also want to take a couple minutes to talk about waste reduction in general. You've probably heard of the 3 R's, reduce, reuse, recycle, but now they consider it more of a 5 R's of waste reduction. First step, and we kind of talked about with food waste, is refusing and avoiding buying new things until they are really in need, or buying in excess of things that are likely going to end up being thrown away at some point. You can try to reduce, and that's just buying less things, buying in smaller amounts, or trying to avoid buying too much of any item. You can try to reuse things. A lot of times our objects, so like easy one is takeout utensils. That's something that you can switch out pretty easily for a reusable alternative and just not accept those at the restaurant. More and more restaurants are getting to the point where they ask you if you want it or not. And so if you're not planning to use it or you don't need to use it and you have reusable silverware available, that's always a better alternative in that sense. You can also try to repurpose things. I've seen a lot of really cool art projects that use old containers from like soup or other things like that. Anything you can try to find to reuse items and avoid the landfill. A lot of people have very creative uses for them, and there's a lot of ideas online. And then lastly, in our waste reduction, so we're trying to avoid any kind of landfill here, is recycling. Making sure that you recycle, especially metals, paper. Paper can go into compost as well if you want to use it there, but trying to avoid the landfill at all costs. A few other local resources, Food Rescue ICT, which I mentioned, which can be found at ictfoodrescue.org. They're a group that would help redirect some of that food waste. KCI Extension Office has even more information on food waste as well and helping prevent that. They've got so many different resources on their website, pretty much anything you're looking for related to food, growing, gardening, compost, all that stuff. And we also have a page on the city website under our sustainability umbrella called Community Resources, and there's a few different informational materials there on waste reduction and recycling, and I brought a few of those with me today if you would like a copy. On waste reduction, and there's a guide on recycling in Wichita and Sedgwick County that the county helped put together. I also wanted to talk briefly about our lawn care rebate program, which we did last year. Still working on bringing that in again this year, hopefully coming soon. So there's a multiplied rebate component of that, and then the electric lawn care rebate component, which required the recycling of an old gas-powered mower. So we're hoping to get some grant money from KDHE, actually, hopefully in a couple months, later this month or next month. And then that will free up more of our budget to put towards this, because last year we ran out really quickly. A lot of people were interested in this rebate, so be sure to keep an eye out for once we do release it. Another program that helps with waste reduction is the Neighborhood Cleanup Program. These are sponsored by local volunteers and can be set up with your community service representative. If you got any questions about it, I think they may have scheduled most of the ones for this year already, but this is a yearly program. And it helps address things like illegal dumping. You can see that bottom right picture with the mattress just kind of scattered in a back alley, and helping people with bulky item disposal at lower no cost to them. Also happening this week, the county is doing a waste tire collection event today, tomorrow, and Saturday. Limit of 50 tires per person. Sedgwick County residents, farmers, and local government only. And I believe it's happening at Sedgwick County West Yard. Yeah, that flyer has it all. They've got it on their website as well. They also have, and I checked earlier today, so I think there's still some available, bulky waste coupons. Those are good for, I think it was like almost 1,000 pounds of bulky waste items. They'll take stuff like furniture. They're not taking mattresses or tires with those, but a lot of other bulky items are acceptable, and that would be no cost to you if you got one of those coupons. There's also some work happening at the libraries, working on a seed library, and long-term goal of maybe a community garden at the Maya Angelou branch. There's a pollinator garden project happening at Evergreen, and they've got lots of books available, of course, on gardening, composting, other related topics. So libraries are a great resource for all of those questions you might have. And we got about 15 minutes left, so happy to take any other questions in person, online, for me or Randy.
Any other questions? I forgot to mention this,
Oh, yeah.
but, in my home, I have just a bin with a lid on that I got at Target in here, and I sit under my sink, and so every time I have a orange peel or whatever I've got, I just open up, throw it in, close the lid again in here, and then when it gets about full, I'll haul it out. So maybe once a week or so, I'll haul this thing out and dump it into my compost bin and do that. I would be remiss if I didn't point out the fact that we've provided you in the back, if you want one, a bookmark talking about Water Smart. And one of the big keys right now is we are in a drought. We are in a water restriction. Cheney Lake keeps getting lower and lower, and we'll see what this summer brings. But short of a 10 or 12 inch rain, we probably are going to be continuing with our water shortage in here. And to do that in here, there are ways you can be smart about it in here, knowing when to water, measure the amount of water you put on. So the answer is put the right amount of water on, not overwatering in here. Most people will overwater given the opportunity. And 7 principles of water-wise landscapes. So when you put in your garden or your landscape or your design in here, think about how you water it in here, and then and when you complement this with adding compost to your soil in here, then you become much more water-wise, more efficient, and that'll save on your water bill because I can't in my wildest dreams imagine that water prices will go down.
Ethan, is your office involved with the shower heads that are available at the libraries and the NRCs? You might mention
Yes,
that
that
too,
is
we just got our
a great
shipment
point.
in Evergreen.
Yeah, we have some available here at Atwater. Some low-flow shower heads and sink aerators that'll help reduce your indoor water consumption if you feel like you've got a shower head that is older and not as efficient, or if your sinks aren't aerating the water. So you'd be able to tell if it's coming out in smaller streams. If it's just one thick, consistent stream, it's probably not. It doesn't have an aerator in it, most likely. So those are free, and they have them here at the office here, provided by Public Works and Utilities. That was some of the same funding that went towards the rebate program. If you're interested in rain barrels or anything else like that, I've got some information on that as well.
You guys give away rain barrels?
Essentially, you can get a rebate that I think covers almost the entire cost of a rain barrel. I think it's $100 now. So if you find a $100 rain barrel, you'd be getting that rebate for that on your next water bill. You just have to fill out an application online and submit that along with a receipt of purchase.
I can't remember, when I was up the one last week, they actually talked about this organization in which makes $100 barrels, so you can just exchange it. They pay.
Yeah.
I do highly recommend the water barrels in here. I have 2 in here. My wife uses them to hand water all of her flowers when she plants them in here. Because for 2 reasons. When rainwater comes down, it picks up nitrogen with it, and it's actually got just a little tiny bit of fertilizer mixed in here. But more importantly, it has no chemicals. Okay, and so rainwater is as pure as you can get, and your plants actually do better with the rainwater in here. And obviously, that's one less thing you have to pay for. Well, again, rain's free. Keep it. Yes.
So for compost and for just gardening in general, it's important to know what your moisture content is on what you're working with. So you can either have an effective compost, or you can monitor the moisture for your garden.
Yeah.
Is there one that you would suggest? What am I looking for? In that space?
I know they make humidity meters in here, and I know you can go to the store and buy actually a 3-way, and they'll give you pH and humidity and temperature, I think, in here, and that, but it's a 3-way probe, or you can get a 2-way probe in here, and it'll tell you what your humidity is, but it's generally, it's more of a generic thing. It's more of a dry, pretty good and wet, that kind of thing in here. Your compost in here, more than anything in here, when you take it out in here, it should feel dampish, and the whole thing should be damp. You shouldn't have any dry spots in it. If you turn it over and there's a big dry spot in the middle, you miss getting water to it, right in here. But if you turn it over and it's sloppy wet, okay, you got too much water in here. So you want this, as you turn your compost, let it be, it should still be fluffy and break apart and not clump. But at the same time, it should be damp to the feel and touch. That's really my main thing.
So for you, you just do it by like
It's just
sight?
by sight
smell,
and feel, yeah,
feel.
and smell. Because, it's a nice smell in there too. But, so after winter was over, I turned my compost in here, and it was just this big lump of hard clay, and all that. And so I broke it down, and I put a layer of this, a layer of brown, a layer of green, a layer of old compost, layer, broke it up, and then it took off cooking again. Got up to 140, and cooked away, and now it's turning into this really nice stuff. This is part of what I showed you. So that's what I got from it. So, and it's a, good smell too.
So if you're starting from scratch and I have brown, I need to, clean up the leaves in my garden and stuff, and then we're always cranking out green. Then what, do you need to get compost from someone to start?
Yeah.
Or do you just do brown and green and
Just
it'll
do brown, green, and green and brown,
dampen
and
it
brown, and green,
and
and water it as you go.
Okay.
It'll become compost. And if you have some soil, you can put some. And it'll start. It's just a question of how quickly it grows and expands and does that. And so by putting in a little soil or a little compost in the mix, you just give it a little boost. But it'll go either way, so you're fine. Okay.
Is there any way to test your compost or just to make sure you're doing it right?
The answer to that is you can't do it wrong. It just may take longer, or it may not come out in here. But in the end, it should be dark, black, crumbly, and smell very earthy without smelling strong. It shouldn't smell like rotten anything. You shouldn't have any odor, you shouldn't have any sulfur smell or anything like that in here. And good compost in here just smells earthy, like you just dug in the soil in here. And good. Now, once you get that in here, then if you have a nice garden area, you can top dress it in here. If you want to mix it in a little bit, you can. You just stir it in. If you have hard clay soil, I recommend that you might start off by putting like 2 inches of compost and tilling it 4 inches down below that, so a 6-inch till in here, and get a good mix of that, and then bust up that clay and gets that organic matter up in the middle of that clay. And now suddenly that clay is no longer hard and compacted. It smells nice and fluffy, has air pockets in it and lots of things. You'll find that then from there on out, you can just stop pressing, put your compost in. If you do your compost right, it should be crumbly enough that you can just broadcast it over the top of your living plants, and it'll settle right down to the ground, go right to the in here. And the worms will come up from the bottom up to the surface, grab the compost and the organic matter, and pull it down to the earth for you, effectively tilling the soil for you. You don't have to till your soil. You don't have to do, that's hard work too, though, in here. Getting out your equipment or your spade or your rototiller and doing that. And the worms will do the work for you if you get worms. And you got to feed them. You give them something to eat.
And you said it was a slow release. How long do you say a plant can benefit from compost? Let's say last year I put compost on my plants. Do you think it's still a slow release?
Well, obviously that partly depends on how much compost and that. But I'm not afraid at all to say I can put a layer of compost on once a year, and it'll carry it through. it'll carry through a whole year. And what I'm trying to do is, rather than trying to make compost once a year, I'm trying to make a little bit of compost all along. So if I get a little bit of compost every month, then sometimes we'll get it in the spring, sometimes in the summer, sometimes in the fall. But I think compost can, if you give it a, reasonable layer, like I said, give it about an inch in here, on that one spot in here, and here, don't just give it a little tiny bit in here. Let's see what it can do in here, then leave it, let it grow. And you'll see that this stuff will just continue to break down and continue to feed your soil and break down and give you good plants in here. And then try to grow something good with it.
Can you use compost as just the soil? Like if you make a functional enough compost situation and you're doing like house plants, can you just use the compost?
I would go 50-50 mix on that kind of a thing in here with a soil or potting soil or something in here, because the compost in itself can become too rich in here. It has a lot of it has some nitrogen in it and stuff like that in here. One of the things, they mentioned to us is that if you get too much organic matter in the soil, then your plants grow so big and so fast that they put an all plant and no fruit, right? And so you get all tomato vine and no tomato, right? That kind of thing. And here, but the more we study it, the more we look at it here. That's true if you till your soil. If you turn the soil and till it, that releases a lot of this stuff in here. It breaks down faster. Therefore, you're getting all this fertilizer boost, and it spikes up for you. But then it goes back down and actually ends up lower than where you started in here. And if you can get to the point where your garden is stable, you're adding compost in here, and no till, that's where the slow release starts coming in here, because then it'll just slowly break down over time the way nature does it, and not trying to force it by plowing or turning the soil in here. And that then gives you that long-term benefit that plants always get in here. You think about nature's number one composting is done every fall when the leaves fall, right? And then it lays on the ground, and then the plants grow up through it, and that stuff turns into compost. They use that all summer long, and then the next fall, more leaves fall. Right? That's the way nature does. And so try to emulate that.
So what you're saying with that is that if I make a good compost, I can use it as like a plant starter.
Yeah.
But if I
And,
use it as the soil,
I threw a challenge to my wife.
I
I said, here's my challenge. My wife she loves her flowers. Oh my gosh, my wife loves flowers in here. She will buy a whole bunch of flowers in here. And she'll dig a hole, and she'll put in a little bit of 10-10-10 fertilizer, and then she'll put the plant in and put dirt around it, and she'll water the plant. I said, let me try an experiment in here. I tell you what, I'll do half the plants, you do half the plants. I'll dig a little bigger hole. I'm going to put in a cup of compost already go in that. I'm going to plant the plant right in that. No fertilizer. See which one of us gets a better plant in here. She hadn't taken me up on the challenge in here, but I told her I really want you to pick any one of your flowers. I don't care. I want half of them. If you do half and I do half, we'll see which one gets better results. Here, this is the bottom line, right? We're done. What's in it for me? Do I get better results? My brother taught me this. When I have a relatively small garden area. My vegetable garden is about 500 square feet. My brother has about 11,000 square feet. He thinks nothing of planting 200 tomato plants or 500 pepper plants in here. And I'm telling him about all this stuff in here, and he's a tiller all the way through.
Does he go downtown to the weekend farm garden?
Well, actually, he lives in Fort Collins, Colorado, so my brother, he gives a lot of money, his way to the food bank. But anyway, I tell him about all this stuff. He read those in-books that I did in here, and he said, the bottom line is this: I don't care. It can be brown, it can have worms, it can not, what I care about is better results. Am I going to get more fruit, more plants, more? Is my garden going to garden more and give me better looking, better tasting, more of whatever, what's my result? What's in it for me? And I thought, yeah, that's the right answer. What's in it for me? Not so much, mom and apple pie and burger, but what's in it for me? Do I get something better? Is my ground better? Is my soil healthier? Is my plants healthier? Are my flowers prettier? My tomato tastes better? Those are the things I want to see.
I think we got a question online, and then.
Yeah, we've got one more question going on in the chat. How do you warm up your compost pile if it isn't in a very sunny spot?
Your compost pile doesn't need to be in a sunny spot. Mine is under a tree, and it will cook itself. The act of decomposing creates heat, and it will get hot without any sunshine. Now, sunshine can help, don't get me wrong, but mine's under a tree, and it's completely 100% shade, and it gets hot.